I don't know. Of course. I November 1st, yeah, first, and I'm taking my down. Yeah, some days I'll let you do a charity.
No, we have. No, I'm good. Well, it's good. Where?
Look, thank you for excusing us and for your patience. We have one more board member who is confirmed to make sure that he gets the benefit of attending. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and open the meeting. This is the October 18th, 2022 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals. Zoning present here this evening are Allison Grass, Robin Richards, John Bennett, Bill Goodman Jr., Chappie McKay, and me, Jeff Tibbles. I'm the chair. Present from the planning staff today are the Batchelder, Kenny Ashby, and Omar Muhammad. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak please identify yourself for the record. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application, or if there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from any opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or to deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning has the authority to do three things. Number one, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number two, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And number three, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the variance. By ordinance, I have to request that anyone who is here to speak this evening go under oath before they come up, and so we'll do it in a group. So if you do plan to speak tonight, I ask you to please raise your right hand, and I ask you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You'll signify by saying, I do. Thank you. Deferrals, we do have one deferral on the agenda this evening. The deferral is listed in item A, number 4, for 411 Meeting Street in Cannonboro, Elliottboro. It has been deferred by the applicant, so if you are here to speak in favor or against the application under agenda item A4 for 411 Meeting Street, you can be excused because we're not going to hear it. All right, no other deferrals, so we'll get to our business. Item A1 on the agenda, review of minutes and deferred applications for previously advertised BZA-Z agendas. Number 1, review of minutes of the October 4th, 2022 board meeting. We have those minutes from the staff. We have had an opportunity to review. Do I hear a motion? All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Goodwin seconds the motion to approve the minutes. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. The motion passes. The minutes are approved unanimously, 6-0. Yes. Yes.
It would have
Ms.
to be 5 because Ms. Richards was not.
Sorry, Ms. Richards, you did not vote, and Mr. McKay did not vote because you were both absent from the previous meeting. The motion still passes by a vote of 4-0. Thank you, Ms. Ashby. The meeting minutes are approved from the last meeting. Item A2, 267 Cumming Street, Cannonboro, Elliottboro, PMS number 460-08-01-199, zone GR2F. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with a 2-foot south side setback, 7 feet required. The owner is Cameron Laws. The applicant is Andrew Rule. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a residentially zoned property in Cannonboro, Elliottboro. It's a vacant lot located just south of Line Street, as shown in this map. And here you see the zoning map showing the residential zoning. The building immediately to the north on the corner of Cumming and Line is a little corner store building. And the proposal here is to construct a house at the front of this property, but because the corner store building extends really into this lot, that footprint of that corner store building extends into this lot. It's been like that for many years. We're proposing to locate the new house on the south side of this lot and place it in close proximity to the house to the south. And so this item has been on your agendas, deferred from previous agendas, and it was because we were waiting on the applicant to provide us with a letter indicating that the neighbor to the south is okay with their proposed house. So they've done that. And I'll go ahead and give you the background. So here you see a view of the lot from Cumming Street. It's been used as parking. And this lot with the corner store building property and the neighboring vacant lot on Line Street are part of a redevelopment plan for this corner. Here's another view showing the property, and you see the house immediately to the south. Aerial view. So you see the vacant lot up here, and on Line Street, and then this lot extends well back on this Cumming Street. These are just old sandborn maps illustrating the pattern of development that's been there in the past. Survey of the property that actually shows the encroachment of the corner store building onto this lot. So it's significant encroachment. Not unusual to have these encroachments downtown, but this is a pretty substantial encroachment. Here in this site plan, you see that encroachment up here. So really, you're not able to put the building on the north side of the lot like you normally would. It needs to be on the south side. So they located here, and halfway to the north side of the proposed building. And that's a 2-foot setback from that south side property line. These illustrate the existing and proposed street elevations along Cumming Street. And so you can see why we just want to make sure that that neighboring property line to the south is going to be objecting to this proposal. And design shown here. This is a single-family residence. Now, stories. So this is these are the neighboring property owners to the south of 263 Cumming Street. This is their letter. And they're fine with the proposal. So with that letter and the information that I've given you, I think they meet the variance test. I think that this is due to the circumstances that the encroachment of the corner store building north, which is a historic building, just remove parts of that building very easily. So in light of these facts, we recommend approval.
All right, thank you, Lee. Before I ask whether or not the owner and applicant are present, is there anyone here who is intends to oppose the application for 267 Cumming Street? Anyone here speak in opposition to this application? All right, seeing none, is the owner or the applicant here? Anything you'd like to express to the board?
Where the Sanborn maps actually show that the historic house that used to occupy that lot many decades ago, all the way back to the 1880s, actually was in the position of proposing. It was part of against the house to the south. And so the driveway location, which is on the north of the lot, which you can see in the photographs, apparently has always been for 140 years the driveway location. And I think that makes a pretty strong case that the house belongs where we're proposing it.
Thank you, sir. Could you just please identify yourself?
And we will.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. Anybody have any questions for the city, questions for the owner and the applicant?
Question, how big is the house?
1,700 square feet, 4 bedrooms.
Further questions? Motion? Ms. Kraus moves to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Richards seconds the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Or opposed? The vote passes unanimously. The variance is granted for 267 Cumming Street. Thank you very much, sir. The next item on our agenda is 330 Pinckney Street, Ansonboro, PMS number 458050193, zoned CT, requesting special exception under section 54-511 to allow a restaurant with 198 square feet of inside patron use area without providing 2 required off-street parking spaces. The owner is Daniel J. Mena. The applicant is Michael F. Mr. Batchelor.
30 Pinckney Street is some commercial transitional. It's on the north side of Pinckney Street, on the north west corner of Pinckney and Anson Street. So it's in the Ansonboro neighborhood, the southern edge, right as you enter the neighborhood, heading north on Anson Street. And it's surrounded by residentially used properties and not residentially zoned, as you can see in this map. The property to the north is zoned commercial transitional, properties to the west. And those first 2 properties to the west are residentially used. So this is a 2-story corner store commercial building with a residence above and commercial space on the ground floor. It's been used a number of years as a retail type of use. Most recently, I guess, was a gallery, which closed a few years ago. And the application is for a restaurant type of use on the ground floor. It's not a traditional restaurant use, but it is classified in our table of permitted uses as a food and drinking place, which is our land use classification for restaurants, bars, and that sort of thing. Just group them all together. And with that type of use, parking requirements are based on the amount of patron use area. So in this case, it's all indoor patron area, and the patron area that they are proposing will require 2 off-street parking spaces. The property doesn't provide those 2 off-street parking spaces for this use, so they're before you seeking a special exception under the provision of the planning ordinance to allow businesses that don't have adequate room for parking to seek your relief for those requirements because of limited space on the site, and or sometimes, many times, no space at all for parking. These are more views of the building. So one thing I'll point out, you see there's an entrance here for commercial space on the ground floor, and then there's another entrance right here on this side of Anson Street. This is the application material submitted by the applicant, and additional information. This is the area of the patrons that they're proposing. And so Pinckney Street is on the south side of this, at the bottom of this site plan. Anson Street is on the right side of the drawing. You've got a residential use to the north and residential use to the west. The floor plan has this space, this room, on the north side of the ground floor that they would use for their dining facility. And the entrance here, again, this is, point that out, that's right over here is a residence adjacent to this property. and a description from the information provided with the application of what they propose to do. And I'll let the applicant explain their proposal here. But they first made application for in July. And so since then, we've been communicating back and forth. And eventually that led to contacts with the neighborhood association, Lansing Borough, and then their application before you to seek this review. And I think that the applicant, with their information that they've submitted, clearly is a reputable operator and has had these kinds of businesses in various locations, this kind of a business in various locations, and been successful at it, clearly. And I'm sure be able to have continued success. I just don't think this is the right location for that type of use. So, with these kinds of uses, there's a difference between just a straight resident or retail type of use. There's more activity, in my opinion, with loading and unloading for food and beverages and that sort of thing. There's more activity in the evenings with people coming and going, and potentially more parking impacts on the neighborhood. And Anson Borough, of course, is a neighborhood that's impacted quite a bit by the market area to the south, and Anson Street is the entrance from the south into the neighborhood with one-way traffic heading north. So it just will add to the impacts on the residential quality of life of that neighborhood, I think, for this type of business. And of course, the approval that they're seeking is an approval that runs with the property. Doesn't run with this applicant only. And this approval will continue, and potentially other operators will be here, and the controls over what would happen are challenging for us to regulate. So, and draft. So, I think the type of use in this particular location, given the proximity to what's around it, is problematic. I also think that even 2 parking spaces doesn't seem like much, but the reality is that sometimes these uses generate more parking requirements, and our requirements are space requirements. So even though there's public parking in nearby locations, some of that parking is going to be displaced in the near future. We already have approvals for 3 hotels between North Market Street and Bentley Street that have not been constructed yet. And one of them is the property immediately to the south of this building, the large surface parking lot. This is the plan that was approved in 2019 for a 115-room hotel. And it will occupy the entire block. It will have parking on site under the building, below the ground floor. But these will be displacing all that parking that currently exists and is available for the public right now. So I think that, coupled with the proposed hotel over here, which is entitled and just sold to a hotel developer, I think we'll be seeing something possibly even at the board for changes to this proposed hotel. But it's coming, so more parking will be displaced over there. So I think this area, although it may not be in the market area, commercial area, challenge parking scheme, it will become more challenged, and that will just push more of the impact on the residential area more. So for those reasons, I don't think this is a appropriate use for this location, given those factors. I know that the applicant has tried to come up with ways of addressing those issues. The Hampton Borough Neighborhood Association remains opposed to the application, and we've received a number of comments, I think, in public comments already, but I think there's some folks who are going to address them as well. So my recommendation is for
Thank you, Lee. So I'm not going to ask whoever's in opposition to start speaking, but just put your hand up if you're here in opposition for this application this evening. All right, so we do have opposition to this application. The city is opposed to the granting of the special exception in this case. Do we have the owner or the applicant? Sir, whoever's going to speak, please come up to the podium and identify yourself by name and address, please.
Hi, my name and address?
Yes, please.
Michael Hebb, 1170 Bexley Street, North Charleston.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. This is so strange because we're zoning appeals. I speak publicly every single day of my life, but I've never had to speak for my life before. Right now I'm speaking for my life. Because if I don't get this, I go out of business. So I run what's called the Historic Charleston Supper Club. I've done it for 2.5 years. The idea for the Historic Charleston Supper Club came about. I have 2 degrees in history, but I also worked in hospitality for about 25 years. So my 2 biggest passions are food and history. Excuse me. They're my 2 biggest passions, they're food and history. So I had this idea, why not put those 2 passions together? Because guess what Charleston's 2 biggest passions are? They're food and history. So I do historic meals in an elegant setting in an old building, basically. I got together with what's called Charleston Culinary Tours, and I've worked with them for the last 2.5 years. So I worked under the umbrella of Charleston Culinary Tours. And did historic dinners out of the French Quarter. Had no problem getting a business license. We signed our lease on March 1st of 2020, right as the pandemic started. It was a very, very slow start, but people went well, got wonderful reviews. You'll see later on that I've gotten pretty much nothing but 5-star reviews on that. And it's gone very well. I moved to a location called the Governor's House Inn. I don't know if you had to approve it, but the Governor's House Inn is no longer an inn. It's being turned into a private residence, so I can no longer use that. And so I decided to venture out on my own, and I found what I thought was the perfect location. Very famous. To me, it's ideal, and it's funny because it's called commercial transitional. It's in between a neighborhood and commercial, and that's ideal to me. You know, I didn't know that there was going to be all these issues with it. For those of you from Anson Borough, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it because I've been trying for 2 months to try to talk to people from Anson Borough and try to get with Hannah. Hannah's Historic Anson Borough Neighborhood Association, and I've run into nothing but brick walls. They won't listen to my story at all. And because of that, the neighbors in Anson Borough have gotten nothing but misinformation about my business. And I really appreciate you coming so you can hear and learn what my business really is. First of all, it's not a restaurant. I understand why y'all call it a restaurant. I have no problem with that. As far as you're concerned, it's a restaurant. But to be honest, it's really one guy that does historic meals to 12 people at a time. That's really all it is. I say when I greet people, I say, I'm your host, I'm your chef, I'm your culinary historian, I'm your waiter, I'm your busboy, and I'm your dishwasher. I say that jokingly, but it's true. I'm the only person that works there. It's a very, very low-key, very, very small business. Mr. Batchelder talked about all the issues that would come with it as far as deliveries, and I don't have any of that. You know what? I don't cook on site. I cook in North Charleston. I bring the food and I eat it. So guess what? No delivery trucks. They don't come ever. So that's really not a problem there. I have very, very short hours. I'm only open for 10 hours a week. That's it. 4 nights, 10 hours a week. I don't have any late nights at all. I don't. I don't know, there's nothing loud going on, there's nothing like that. It's a very, very low-key situation. I know that the major concern this evening is parking. I do understand that this location doesn't provide parking. Neighbors of Ansonboro Board of Zoning Appeals, if I thought that the decision was going to be made tonight to take parking places away from the people of Ansonboro, I would take my application away right now, because there's absolutely no way that I would let that happen to the people of Ansonboro. I'm not going to take their parking away from them. I can't speak for the Board of Zoning Appeals, but I know you're not going to do that either. But that's the misinformation that's out there, is that they think that I'm going to take their parking spots away. I wouldn't be here. I would just first say, yeah, I'll go out of business. That's not a problem. So I'm not here to take away people's parking. Not at all. I'm here to provide a wonderful experience. I've gotten nothing but almost 5-star reviews, as you can see. And I'm here to just bring joy to people and also to educate people. My business is culturally important to Charleston. I don't just talk about the good things of Charleston. I talk about its checkered past. I talk about slavery. I talk about the slave trade. I talk about the Civil War. If I was in Ansonboro, I'd talk about the Great Fire of 1838. I talk about the Ansonboro Rehabilitation Project. All those things that are culturally impacted. This is a commercial transitional location. What better thing to happen there is something that has a cultural impact. You put a retail store in there, that's not going to have a cultural impact. I do. So I know parking is the major issue here, but also what Mr. Batchelder says, he recommends another type of location. Well, I'm here to tell you that any other type of location besides mine, because I'm really truly not a restaurant, is going to have more impact on the neighbors of Ansonboro than I ever would. You know why? Because my experience lasts for 2 hours. Guess what? They cannot legally park on Anthony Street or Pinckney Street or Hazel Street or any street for 2 hours. They're subject to 2 parking tickets of $25 each. So they can't legally do that. If you have a retail location at that spot, guess what? They can park. You'll see in my packet, the average time that anyone ever spends at a retail store, and that includes grocery stores, is 16 minutes. So guess what? They can come to that location, they can park right on Anson Street as much as they want, and they can go in, and then they can leave, and they don't get a ticket, and they're taking away parking spots from the people of Ansonboro. You can't do that. What if it was an office? Offices are even worse. You think an office, oh, it's nice and quiet. Well, guess what? Offices are all only going to bring cars to the location. And guess what? They're going to be cars of people that are locals. And those locals know those laws that you can park legally for an hour in Ansonboro. So guess where they're going to park? They're going to park right on Anson Street, Pinckney Street, Hazel Street, Wentworth Street, whatever. That's where they're going to park. So I apologize, Mr. Batchelder, but I'm in full disagreement that a retail store or any other type of business besides mine is going to influence, or it's going to have a more negative influence, or a more positive influence, than mine would. I don't have any kind of deliveries, because guess what? I do it off site. There's been issues about waste removal. Well, guess what? I do all of my cooking in a commercial kitchen in North Charleston. So guess what? I can bring the waste back to that commercial kitchen in North Charleston. The people of Ansonboro will never ever see it. Any kind of commercial location there, if it's a retail store, they're going to have waste. Anything that all the delivery trucks that they get, which I won't have delivery trucks, they're going to have boxes to unload. They're going to fill up bins that are going to sit on Pinckney Street. Have that. The biggest thing about the parking issue is that, yes, I know I don't have the required 2 parking spots. It's just 2 parking spots. I hate to say that I don't have the required 2 parking spots, but there are 2 huge parking lots across the street. I know that the one to the south is going to eventually be a hotel, but there's also a parking garage about 300 feet away as well. And I want to be the best possible neighbor to the people of Ansonboro. And what I have proposed to the people of Ansonboro is that, you know what? Why don't I pay for people's parking? I will validate their parking. They can park, and there's another lot, Mr. Batchelor showed it, right to the north, or to the east, excuse me, I'm getting turned around. Right to the east, that lot averages about 40 empty spaces every single night. I will validate their parking. So they have two options. They can park illegally on Anson Street and maybe get 2 tickets for $50, or they can park for free. I think that's a pretty good option. Also, I'd love to point out, and it's in the packet that I put together for you, is I've been controlling parking at my locations for 2.5 years. I was at Charleston Culinary Tours. Charleston Culinary Tours is at 46B State Street. There is only residential parking there. If you stand at 46B State Street, you cannot see any public parking whatsoever. Stand at 35th Street, you see 2 huge parking lots right across the street. You know what? The whole time I was at 46B State Street, I never ever had anyone park on State Street. Why? Because I'm so small that I communicate with all of my guests. Guess what? My website explains parking. Guess what? They get an email the night before explaining parking. Tell them, don't park on State Street, you will get a ticket. It's enforced 24 hours a day. Guess what? The second that they arrive, I ask them where they park. In 2.5 years, I never had anyone park on State Street. They're not gonna park where they can't, and they have to walk a long way from State Street. The closest public parking is metered parking on Cumberland Street, but those are always full. They always had to go to a parking structure, or amazingly enough, they would go what I call the First Baptist lot, because the First Baptist gym used to be there. They park in the First Baptist lot, which is actually across the street from. I was then at the Governor's House Inn. The Governor's House Inn has residences on 3 sides of it, and it sits on Broad Street. So there's residences on 3 sides. There's residential parking on 2 sides, and then there's meters out front. When I went to the Governor's House Inn, though, they didn't want my historic supper club people parking in their provided parking for their guests. So what did I do? It was described on the website. They got an email the day before. When they arrived, I asked them where they parked. Guess what? The entire time, and I was there such a short time because it ended up selling, no one ever parked. And any parking except for out front for the meters. So, again, I'm nervous, so I know I didn't cover everything, but I think I covered a lot. Do you have anything to say, or? Okay.
Yes, and please identify yourself
Okay.
For the record. No, Mr. Hebb has already done
Yes.
so.
Okay, I'm Dan Madden, owner.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Property has been, space has been vacant for a while because I was trying to source the right tenant. I live upstairs. My bedroom is above the market, and have the dinner. I did not want a coffee shop, I did not want whatever. So when that Michael, it was interesting to me because I thought it would be the least intrusive of what people will propose. Little that I know, it's not the least intrusive. Apparently anybody's upset about it. Well, some people are upset about it. So I met with Lee, I spoke to Angela Drake, I met with Lee and Penny, and expressed our concerns about parking, food waste. So part of his lease, he cannot leave any waste there. He cannot prepare any food there. And he has to be responsible for parking as part of the package when they buy. 12 people, he's full. So at the meeting with Lee and Penny, I reached out to Angela, we were going to have a meeting on September 20th. And Monday, I said it's going to be Tuesday, we were going to meet. And she said, well, some of the board members are sick, I don't know what's happening. And then Tuesday morning, I asked her that, no, we're not going to meet. After that, I reached out to her several times and never got a phone call back. That's voicemail, like text messages. So I don't know what, I understand, I was told by Angela that they're representing the board, what the city's saying. They're saying that the city says, this is what the, so Hannah's saying, whatever the city says, that's a real deal. It's the city, they're saying it's a restaurant, we need parking. You can't have parking across the street because it abrupts to residential areas. Most of my people, I'm assuming, be out of town or a hotel or something like that. They can do some transition thing. Like, I had a restaurant in North Carolina for 18 years. I did not want a restaurant. I'm very familiar with it and the products. And when I met Michael, he understood this. This is what he's going to do. He's going to use it as a venue for his historical, and also cooking tours. So I thought it would be a good fix. Unfortunately, the neighborhood association didn't think it was a good fix. We did not reach out to the neighborhood association, or Michael did not. So I wanted to talk to Angela. I was told, we should have done this first. Okay, maybe we should have done this first. Right now, in hindsight, we should have done this first. But I don't see, I do not want the problem, and I don't see Michael being the problem. That's all. And the concern with the entrance, Anson Street is not going to be the entrance. The entrance is going to be on Picnic Street. So Michael, so that's the door that faces the parking lot. It's going to be the Post Hotel, and no food waste at the property. And he's going to provide parking, or validation of parking, proof of parking, as part of the contract when they signed it. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate your insight, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mena. Is there anybody else here who wants to speak in support of the application?
I'll be very quick. My name is Mary Willis. I'm a lawyer that has been representing Mr. Hare throughout the process. I just wanted to address some of the misinformation that was in some of the letters that y'all received from Hannah. There were some statements that seemed to indicate that Mr. Hare has been operating in this location without a business license. So I just wanted to reiterate that that is not the case. He has not operated whatsoever in this location. There's also some statements regarding the fact that he does not yet have a business license to operate here. And I don't think I need to tell y'all this, but this is the prerequisite to getting the license. And so until we can overcome this hurdle, Mr. Hare cannot be, he can't be licensed. I'm here if y'all have any questions for me.
I am so pleased that we have an attorney here, and I do appreciate your comments, Willis. I want to be sure that we're all clear on what it is that we're doing here, because what is required under the city ordinance is for this proposed use for this building, it is required to have 2 parking spaces pursuant to 54-511. 54-511 gives specific guidance as to criteria, and for to grant a special exception, this board is a fact-finding function of this board, as I read earlier. We have to make a determination as to whether or not this property qualifies for that special exception. So I didn't see it in the application materials, but let me just read to you section 54-511. It says the number of off-street parking spaces required by this chapter shall not be reduced except with the approval of the Board of Zoning Appeals upon a determination by the Board of Zoning Appeals that the enforcement of the required number of spaces would prevent reasonable use of a lot. And make, so that's the key threshold we have to meet. We have to say, okay, we agree that without an exception, that it would prevent a reasonable use of this lot. And then it gives us some factors to consider. One, whether the proposed use is an allowed use in the applicable zoning district. Number 2, whether the existing buildings as configured on the lot or the existing buildings as configured on adjoining lots make it feasible to provide off-street parking. Number 3, whether street frontage of an existing lot is so limited that a driveway for access to a parking area would unreasonably or impracticably reduce the area available for occupancy by structures. Number 4, whether the grant of special exception will adversely affect neighboring properties. And number 5, whether the applicant has pursued good faith efforts to provide off-street parking. So in order to guide our decision as to whether or not there can be reasonable use made of the lot, we have to examine each and every one of those criteria and make sure that they're met. So I didn't know if you had comments on those specific criteria that the Board of Zoning Appeals is required to consider.
I do, and in our initial letter to the city, we tried to address a lot of those issues. I think based on the way that the lot is previously configured and existing, it's not feasible for there to be a parking provided in that area. We basically got to the point where we were looking at, A, would it adversely affect the neighboring association, and then also B, did we make good faith efforts to try to resolve a lot of these issues? Mr. Hebb, we proposed at least 3 different parking lots when we were looking to lease spaces. Unfortunately, none of the lots that we presented to the city were within the appropriate square footage. I actually think the city told me there's no parking lots available that are within the appropriate square footage in that area. So, I mean, we went to 3 different business owners that own parking spaces within the vicinity. It would have been, reasonable walking distance for Mr. Hebb's customers, all of whom said, sure, we're more than willing to lease you 2 spaces, but unfortunately, none of those met the present ordinance as it stands today, at least not in that location. We did, when we initially came, we had scheduled a hearing before y'all about a month ago, and we had received some issues that the neighborhood association had raised in terms of waste removal. There were concerns about smell, which is why Mr. Hebb changed his business plan to remove all of the trash from the area and transport it back to where he cooks all the food in North Charleston. Another concern that was brought to our attention was the parking, obviously, which we have tried to address. I think when we weren't able to find a lot that complied with the ordinance, he presented the option to validate all of the parking, which he just told you about. Some of the other concerns were, customers coming and going. I told you this is he operates for 2 hours, 4 nights a week. It's a, super small time, and the parking lots that are currently open to the public that are in this area are almost vacant during the hours of his operation. So, I think we have addressed the factors that are required to meet special exception under the ordinance. If you have any questions in particular about what you would like us to address further, we're happy to do so. But we have done, Mr. Hebb in particular has been working really hard over the last 2 months to figure out a way to make this opportunity work for him. I think if there is any sort of business that belongs in this neighborhood, it's a business that would.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Do you have anybody else here to support, speak in support of the application? Anyone else here to speak in support of this application? All right, I know we had some hands raised for folks to speak in opposition, which you could just please come on up and state your name and address for the record, please. Tell us about your position.
Good evening, I'm Angela Drake, and I'm president of the Historic Andover Neighborhood Association, representing 285 residents and members. I was contacted, I would say the 1st of August, by the city of Charleston, the planning committee and board, asking if I had been contacted by Mr. Hebb or the owner of the building, who had signed the lease on July the 6th. This was the 1st of August. The owner is not a member of HANA, so I didn't have his contact information. So I reached out for Mr. Hebb's information, and thus found this website advertising that the supper club would be opening August the 17th. So there wasn't a telephone number that went into a specific mailbox, but I filled out the comment section. City of Charleston, and said that she would be contacting me. Here's my telephone number, here's my email address, and I live at 28 Anson Street, across the street actually. 2 weeks went by, and finally the owner then reached out to me. We had a conversation, and I asked him about permitting, business licensing, reaching out to the neighborhood, and he said the proprietor had taken care of all of that. Waited, received additional phone calls from the owner. And then, as of September 6th, the HANA membership and the board of directors decided to send out a letter of opposition to the project. There's many reasons, and the primary one being parking. Yes, we do have 1 hour parking, but Mr. Lawrence, Tyrone Lawrence, the guy of parking, you have parking. This is not enough people to control 1 hour parking. He does in his own time and as well as he can. But we're a district surrounded by restaurants, hotels, proposed hotels, restaurants on East Bay Street that started out as fish market, and become quite popular. And there's parking in the neighborhood. So our first letter of opposition went out September 6th. There were proposals, and I often see better than I hear. So if you look in your package, it's assigned by the proprietor, but not the owner. There really hasn't been an established contract to the original lease that was proposed on July 6th. Now, Ansonburg in itself, the ordinance governing parking spaces prohibits them from renting, not giving up parking gibbets for reimbursing you for parking. The ordinance states renting the mandatory spaces from the surface parking lots nearest 30 Picking Street. In addition, if you look at Mr. Batchelder's lay of the land for Ansonburg, you'll notice there's a series of 7 single houses dating from 1894 that run from numbers 13 to 25. Guess what? They have no off-street parking. Their only parking is on the street. So, free parking on both blocks of Pygmy, because I know the owner has a few cars, and Anson Street is very limited for residential. So I'm here tonight to say, please take into consideration that Hannah wants to maintain the residential fabric and offer our neighbors parking for the benefit of the residents. So
Thank you, Ms. Drake. Anybody else here to speak in opposition to this proposal? Okay, we'll hear from the young woman right behind you. Either way.
So, what was that? Go right ahead.
I can speak, however, due to childcare constraints, not to use by 625, is that acceptable? So must I remain for the rebuttal?
No, you must, we won't force you to stay any longer than you need to.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. My name is Allison Beston. I am along with my husband, the owner of 7 Street. And I have come today to speak regarding several concerns. The first has already been discussed, but parking. I would just note, as Ms. Drake previously noted, our only parking is the residential parking located on Hampton Street. We have no off-street parking. And so the fact whether this motion could be granted may result in less, which is already something we struggle with. Also, for our childcare, our babysitters are not even usually able to park on this block. If they're helping us for more than an hour, we have to pay to have them park in these residential lots and the off-street parking nearby. Notice the carriage lot, I think it's directly across from the proposed structure. And I am also aware the owner noted that he may be able to provide off-street parking if he were to pay for his patrons to park in his off-street lots. I understand this is a business question for the owner. However, just from my experience paying for our child care to park in those lots, we know that it's very expensive and they would have to take that into account. I think it's even for 2 hours, it would be $4, possibly going up to $12 if they're there for 2 hours. So again, that's a business concern that they would have to address, but I'm not sure whether that would be feasible, and instead whether they would be looking for their patrons to park on the street. Second, I just wanted to briefly address the commercial nature of the neighborhood. We moved to Ansonboro in June of 2021. We moved down to New York because we were looking for a place to raise our child that was in a nice home neighborhood, that was a place that we considered very safe and where she could just today she was riding her bike in the street. There weren't that many cars going up and down the street. It was at 5 o'clock right before I came here. We consider it a very safe place for our child to be outside during the day. And I understand the business may be operating more at night. At least that's my understanding based on the proposal. However, even if there are folks that are coming in and out more at nighttime, it may feel like it's becoming more of a commercial neighborhood. And it may be a place I feel like it's less residential focused. And that's what we had been hoping for when we moved our family down here a few years ago. And I also understand this is a part of the test that the board looks to, whether it would change the commercial nature of the neighborhood. I live in the ESG houses north of the proposed restaurant, and I do just from a personal standpoint feel that it would change the proposed nature, the current nature of the neighborhood. And lastly, I wanted to comment on what I heard when I believe it was the chair who was discussing one of the legal aspects of the property, where it seems like there would be a future covenant included that seems like it would run with the land, and if this were to be approved, it seems like there would be a relative lack of control going forward over future use of this property. And so even though the proposed business would only be operating the for 2 hours a day for next week, that would adversely affect my property going forward, because if the owner were to sell this property and that were to be included as covenant permitted for use in future leases, it may be that you could have something that is even more disruptive that we would not necessarily then be able to oppose at that time. And so, given the fact that I think there's a relative lack of transparency here about what may be done in the future with this property, that's another reason that I would oppose this. And so I appreciate your taking the time to hear from me today as an owner of the property nearby, as a mom, as someone who really enjoys living in this neighborhood and has lived there for over a year now, and really hopes to be able to continue to live with my family in a place that will be a very safe place and more residential place than I believe this would our neighbor. So thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Elaine, I think you're ready.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, and first of all, thank you for your time. I'd like to present a little bit of a different slant.
Yes, please, your name.
Christina Dodd, 42 Basic Street. I've been with more than 22 years. I'm not currently on the board, but I have been on and off the board more times than you can count. I'm very well aware of what we do to protect our little community. We have, ever since I can remember moving there, we have been very, very protective about parking. We have vetoed anything and everything. Case in point, we had one member who was a resident. She asked for an exception for parking. We denied her. She was not a happy camper, but we feel you have a policy, you have to adhere to it. What else? Otherwise, you erode it and then it's all gone. Now, that said, I thought Mr. Hebb presented a description of what he wanted to do, his passion for it, how he wants to do it. But frankly, if I were a tourist, I would love to go. It sounds very, very inviting. But the fact is, it doesn't belong primarily, as I said, traffic and parking, but also not to underscore something that will not make him, unless I miscalculated, he's been in business 7 years, and this would be his 3rd location. And if this one didn't work, then the parking stays with the property, and then he's really going to have. So because of that, I ask you please not to allow this.
Thank you very much. Anyone else here to speak in opposition of the application for 30 Pinckney Street? All right, we have an opportunity for rebuttal from Mr. Hebb. Anything you'd like to say in further support? And as you walk up, I want you to know that this is not a referendum on your business or the kind of restaurant that you run, or whether you're passionate about your pursuit. I think everybody recognizes that you are. We applaud you and commend you for the service that you're providing for folks who want to work dinner. The question that we have, and we have to answer, we're tasked with answering, is whether or not we can grant a special exception for parking where there is an ordinance that requires parking, and there are specific criteria that define when we can waive that. And one of those is the neighborhood, whether or not it will be that the neighborhood. And so that's, for me, a critical issue in the city of
Real quick, before I forget, I haven't been in business Remember, I started off at Charleston Culinary Tours, went to the governor's house, and then got sold. I can't control that. I can't control something being sold. It had been on the market for 3 years. And I just assumed that I would, that whoever bought it as an inn, I would just stay with the inn. So I've been bouncing around all over the place. The main reason I didn't just go right back to Charleston Culinary Tours is because I left them. I was still working with them, but they're doing different things in that dining room now. So that's why I decided to venture out on my own and find what I thought was the purpose. So I haven't been in business for 7 years. I've only been in business for 2.5 years. The only reason it's my 3rd location. Great thing about this, because I am a one-man show, is that it's profitable instantly. You know, because I don't have any overhead. You know, I showed it when in the area that I talk about retail, that I have 76% profit margin. Nobody has 76. You know, but it's immediately profitable, so it's a long lasting. Concerning Mrs. Drake and her comments, I wish she would just go back and check her email. We didn't apply for the exemption until August 8th. She said August 1st. I first reached out to her, so I can't see with my glasses on. I did first reach out to her on August 22nd. The reason that I didn't immediately reach out with her, and this was on the advice of Ms. Willis, is that was the time that we were still pursuing the angles. She mentioned all the different parking lots. I mean, I went down there and I was, you know, walking off how far away these parking lots and all that, and eventually they told me. Eventually they just said, you know, there's no parking lot you can use. There's no parking lot you can lease. Even though I'm very good friends with one of the owners of that parking lot. And so on the advice of Ms. Willis, she said, well, let's try and see if we can get this business license without having to go through the appeal. So let's just hold off a little bit on contacting Mrs. Drake. I've actually reached out to her after that, and I apologize for not reaching out to her, so I didn't know that it was that big of a deal. But the problem is, after that, I mean, that was from the 8th to the 22nd, is what, you know, a couple of weeks basically. She'll go 29 days without responding to me. And she, the first 3 emails that she sent me, if you add up all the words and all the emails, were 22 words. And all they were, the first one was, I'll get back to you. And you know what? She didn't do that for 6 days after I sent that an email. And the initial email that I sent to her on August 22nd, she never answered. I sent her another email on August 26th because I was concerned that there's 2 different addresses that she had, that I sent to the wrong address. No, I had the right address. She just didn't answer. August 27th, she finally answered me, but all she answered me was, I'll get back to you. That was it. Then on,
Mr. F, I don't think we need to get into it.
Okay, well, I just want you to know that she hasn't been willing to work with me in any way whatsoever, and because of that, you know, she's told all of Hannah, she's told everyone that they're gonna steal your parking, which is, and I told you before, I'd withdraw my application if I was gonna steal it.
I think the issue is when you are proposing to use a property in a certain way.
Right.
You're with the ordinance, you know what can and can't be done. You know what you may need to do to use it in the way that you propose. And if you do that and you see that it requires some neighborhood approval or support, or at least showing that your use is not detrimental to the neighborhood, it would behoove any applicant to then reach out to some of the neighborhood.
Right, but we still reached out 3 weeks beforehand, and now we've done 3 deferments, so we're 6 weeks later than that, so we're talking about 9 weeks. And the lack of communication has been unbelievable.
And we do have a good record of all the communication back and forth in our packet.
All right.
Consider that.
All right. Yeah, do we have anything else?
I don't think we have anything further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Portion, unless anybody has specific questions for the owner or applicant or the president of the panel, which you can, of course, make despite the comment. Anybody have any questions? Any questions for Lee or the city or the staff?
I have just one question for Lee. Talk a little bit about what vertical transition role that play.
The zoning district does permit restaurants, and it does have, as a conditional use, let me put it that way. So as a conditional use, you have to satisfy certain conditions in the ordinance to be approved for restaurant use. The hours of operation are limited to between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. for indoor patron areas. There are restrictions on outside patron areas that would prevent any outside patron areas from being part of the restaurant at this location due to the proximity of residentially zoned properties. And the sale and the consumption of alcoholic beverages has to be incidental to the food operation, so it can't be a bar, can't even be a wine bar. It's got to be a restaurant that has primarily food generating the income, not alcohol. So those are the conditions that would apply to the restaurant.
So the proposed use, if it had two on-site parking spaces, would be allowed under the current zoning designations, right? Yes, correct.
All right, and I'm questions are worked out around it, so I'll make sure I'm getting all the facts and established. So it is possible to source parking from neighborhood lot provided only lease agreement with spaces, but it sounds like there is a distance issue too far from the subject property to qualify.
I do recall one location on the space for being too far away, because the parking, in order to satisfy the lease requirements for off-site parking, has to be within 400 feet of the subject property as it goes lies, and has to be on a commercially zoned property, and has to be secured with a 10-year lease, which makes it extremely difficult to find any parking anywhere that can satisfy those requirements, because people are just not willing to tie up their property with a 10-year lease. The other thing is that for restaurants, they can't lease parking that would otherwise meet those requirements if that parking lot is adjacent to residentially zoned property or 55 feet of a residentially zoned property. So, in other words, this large parking lot, well, the small corner parking lot on the north side of Pinckney Street, east of Hanson Street, that does not, even if you could work out a 10-year lease with that owner, which I'm sure you can, because it's owned by the people who are going to develop the hotel, that parking would not qualify for a restaurant use because it's adjacent to residential property. So those are the challenges with meeting any kind of off-site lease parking.
So there is an existing parking lot that might meet the requirements if they could lease two spaces for a period of 10 years, but that property is subject to redevelopment as a hotel.
Right.
Issues would go along with property, not the owner. Themselves, would change this property.
That would be my question also, so that if we were to approve this with some types of conditions of parking, whatever, would those conditions also go with the property? If we set conditions?
Any conditions that you attach to an approval would carry forward.
Carry forward.
If this approval would be a condition.
So the previous businesses that were at this location, they had parking contractual parking or it
No,
wasn't
I
an
think
issue?
when I came here, started working for the city 35 years ago, it was, I believe Papa John's was located on the ground floor. There was a retail use bookshop, that kind of thing, like retail use on the ground floor, and they were there for a number of years. And then more recently, it's been an art gallery. So I don't recall anything regarding parking. And I think the upstairs was always a residential.
It's a use that you don't have to have it. You want to.
Well, you might have to have two for retail use, but then the gallery, according to our records, closed more than 3 years ago. So the right to that grandfather expired. It was lost due to the length of time.
Right, his parking regulations.
Well, you mean in zoning?
This particular ordinance will be passed. It's probably passed after the
Yeah, well, the requirements for parking predate my time, so they can go back.
to this particular ordinance does.
They changed over time, but we've had parking requirements since.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
So any commercial use of the space is going to require parking.
And they would have to have a lease of 10 years, is what you're saying?
Well, they would either have to secure your approval for that use without the parking, or they would have to provide a use. Outside parking.
So basically taking outside the special exception.
Right.
In terms of parking intensity, the differing uses between retail and restaurant or other uses that are same two space requirement.
No, the restaurant use is required to have one space for every 90 square feet. Or it's, I'm sorry, it's 1 per 100 square feet. And for a retail use, it's 1 per 400 square feet of gross floor space.
And I know we have this in the record, I'm sure, Mr. Hebb, what is, you, how many nights or how many days? Like,
Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
and how many patrons do you typically have?
12 at the most, and I only take reservations, so there's 0 foot traffic.
Any other questions? We can have further discussion after a motion if anybody wants to make a motion.
Question to the owner, as far as the uses are concerned, if there's special stipulations put on property, would you value checking?
Sorry.
Special stipulations on your property? I'm just talking out loud, if we consider special stipulations, if we decide that there may be a
Sure.
possibility.
I'm not,
Um,
looking to make a move here, I'm looking to like space and with the tenant, I don't think I've got that in mind. I'm not, and I know you're very familiar with this time to change something with you, so I'm not looking to do that. Live there, son, has Asperger's, and Market Street's and you walk to work, shop. So, right,
I have a question. Michael mentioned that you also participated in trying to find
parking when we were unsuccessful in finding parking.
Questions? Anybody have a motion? Okay, moves to deny. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennett seconds the motion to deny. All in favor of the motion to deny, a vote of aye is a vote against the application. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, the motion to deny passes unanimously. The request for the special exception for 30 Piglet Street is denied. I wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. The special exception is denied. All right, the next item on our agenda is B1, 610 Rutledge Avenue, North Central, PMS number 460-03-02-053, zone DR-1F, requesting an appeal of the zoning administrator's interpretation of section 54-506C of the city's zoning ordinance and decision to deny plans for a rear addition. The owner is DFH South LLC. The applicant is Chris Bonner, V Studio Architecture. Mr. Batchelder.
610 Rutledge Avenue in the north central neighborhood. It's located on the east side of Rutledge, just below Strawberry Lane, which is just below Fiji Street. And you see it's in the mid-block, so there's a property immediately to the north and two properties immediately to the south. Here's a zoning map, and it reflects the buildings that are on the property today. The largest building is a single-story residence. There's a small one-story building that fronts on Rutledge Avenue, which I think maybe was originally a garage and was later used as a small commercial space. And then there are some storage buildings in the back. So here's an aerial view showing the property. You see to the north, two-story building on that lot. The historic building at the front on Rutledge Avenue, and a two-story building in the back, and the building to the south. So the applicant came in and met with me and showed me plans. He's an architect, showed me plans for proposed addition to the single-story residential building. And he was seeking my support for applying this exception to the setback requirement, which is part of the zoning ordinance in section 54-506. So this exception allows the staff to rear additions to houses that don't meet this north or south, north or east side setback requirement. And there's a reason for that. This wasn't part of the zoning ordinance until 1996, and so it was added in 1996 to address requests that were continuing coming before the board, seeking the board's approval, and for these rear additions to extend existing house footprints to the rear, when those house footprints will meet the setback requirement on the north or inside. And this was the typical situation. This is my little sketch here, that you typically would have a house that was situated close to or on the north side property line or the east side property line of the property. It's just a pattern of how homes were built on the peninsula. And that building doesn't meet the setback requirements that zoning proposed well after the building was constructed. So very common circumstance that we have on the peninsula, even later on both in Wagner Terrace, because of our zoning requirements don't meet setback requirements on one or both sides, and typically it's that east side yard or the north side yard. And so people are coming in for these additions, having to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals to get this relief. And we took it upon ourselves to draft an amendment to the zoning ordinance and take it through the approval process to come up with an exception that allowed staff to be able to approve these situations. So we didn't have to go to the board. We've done that in a number of cases, number of situations over the years, because routinely the board was granting approvals. And said, well, why don't we just amend the zoning ordinance to allow those kinds of things to be done without additional stuff going to the board. That can be very time consuming for everybody involved. So trying to manage the workload of our board, felt like that was a good thing to do. So we did that, and the ordinance is actually right here. This is the 1996 ordinance. And we had a couple whereas statements in here. And I wrote this. I don't remember exactly the circumstances other than what I've indicated, but residential buildings in older sections of the city typically do not meet side yard setback requirements under more. Whereas the Board of Adjustment, which was now the Board of Zoning Appeals, typically approves these variance requests for extensions to residential buildings on side setbacks. And back then, there was a term that was used by our board chairman, Mr. Project, and it was a full-pepper extension. That was just a common term. I don't know where that came from, but that was a very common term in with the Board of Zoning Appeals back then. And so I actually referenced that in this ordinance. So we took this forward, City Council approved it, and it's been on the books ever since. This is meant to apply to rear additions. Is the language in this exception speaks to rear additions, but it also is intended to allow for extensions to those residential buildings. So if I go back to the site plan, a typical situation would be for the main house to be 1, 2, or maybe even 3 stories in height. And then maybe this part back here is only 1 story or 2 stories, but it's less in height, less tall than the main house. And so the extension of whatever is in the back of the property became the, what dictated the maximum height. And if it was 1 story, then we would allow a 1-story addition. If it was 2 stories, we would allow a 2-story addition. But we didn't allow a 2-story addition on the back of the house that was 1 story. That was the idea. And that's what we reflected here. And for a while, we might have been doing that, and the board said, you can't do that. We don't agree with that interpretation of this exception. So fast forward, the applicant is proposing, again, this is a 1-story house right here, and he's proposing an addition that would extend off the rear of the house. So it has a 0-foot more side setback right now. He would carry that 0-foot more side setback further back. So the length of the addition is acceptable under the exception, the wording of the exception. However, a portion of this rear extension will be more than 1 story in height. And that was the issue that I had with approving it at the staff level. And so I explained to him my reasoning for that, and disagreed and appealed that before you tonight. I also noticed that part of the addition that he's proposing is not to the rear of the existing building. So I've highlighted the existing building footprint here, and then the addition is shown coming off of that building. And it kind of wraps around the existing building right here. So that's another issue, probably not as big of an issue for me, but the fact that the extension of that one-story building includes a two-story element, or 2.5-story element is what gives me pause. And so these are just more detailed plans showing the second floor right here, half-story on top of that, behind the existing house, and these are it's a blow up of that previous site plan, and then these are the elevations. So you see the existing one-story house right here, and you see the proposed addition off the back. Now I will say the higher portion of this extension is outside of the north side setback. It doesn't violate any setback, but I don't think I can approve this at a staff level because of the wording of that exception. So that leaves him with the option of applying to the board to seek the special exception to extend non-conforming building footprint, which is what he's done, and that's the next application on the agenda. And I honestly don't really object to the proposal that he's got coming before you the next item on the agenda, but I don't feel that I can apply the exception that allows me or the staff to approve this, given the fact that part of that extension is taller than the existing house. So that's my reason.
All right, thank you, Lee. So just to be clear, we are only dealing with one application at a time, and the first one, the appeal of the zoning administrator's interpretation.
That's correct.
And then they have a second application that's coming. Would that be rendered moot by our decision on number one?
No, that wouldn't be rendered moot because he's also proposing to extend the build an addition off the back of this one-story building right here, which is along the south side property line of this property. That will also require, that's the second request.
Okay, let's go ahead and, thank you, Lee. Let's go ahead and open up the public hearing portion. Is there anybody here who is opposed to the application B1 610 Rutledge Avenue? If you're opposed, let's see your hand. Nobody's opposed. Is the owner or applicant here?
Yes, I am. Yeah. I appreciate we kind of touching on some of the history of this particular ordinance because it does get used often.
Please identify.
Oh, Chris Bonner with BZA-Z Architecture, address 1103 Justice Street.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate Lee talking about the history of this particular ordinance because it does get used often as our zoning was laid upon our city years after most of it does. From the architectural professional standpoint, the reason I kind of put in the request, I guess, or against this particular question on this particular ordinance was that a lot of what you had talked about and really even mentioned here shortly before was use a lot of words like intended to or what's supposed to be something. And when looking at the code verbatim, the law document, those items aren't in it. And so it's certainly difficult to deal with clients when there is a lot of intended to be or should be or we thought it would be kind of items within the zoning code. But in actuality, those items just don't exist in the physical wording of the code. So if we go back and look at that ordinance, it says we're allowed to extend the non-conforming setback 50% larger than the existing home. There's nothing talking about how high that rear residential will be. There's nothing talking about, really any of this, the other items that he's rejecting the application. And so we took into account actually even the assumption that there some of these things were, having dealt with the city in the past, we understand that, we do not want to put a two-story addition necessarily behind a one-story addition in that setback. So we're talking just about the 3 feet, the 3 feet between what the setback is and what the existing house is. And so, the addition we put on that house for those 3 feet match the exact house. And we took, the max of that particular house and pushed it to the center of the lot so that we're not putting a two-story addition right on the property line. We wouldn't be here today if we want to squeeze our addition 3 feet over. We would have no problem with that particular residential part of this addition. So it's just that 3 feet. And our design was to match the existing home within those 3 feet, and actually more, to kind of get that massing away from that property line. But really, just for this particular part of our street court application, it's really just the fact that the words in the font that the zoning administrator used to reject our application don't exist in the code. It certainly makes it difficult to design buildings and gain approval if those words don't actually exist. As you said, this particular ordinance was passed in 1996, or 1996. So certainly there's been 20 plus years that those ideas and intentions and thoughts behind this particular ordinance were meant to be there. It had 30 plus years to add that language into it. A lot of inferring kind of happening at that level, and certainly, the zoning code being a legal document, that was truly the intention of this ordinance and the exceptions. It really needs to be in there by words, so that somebody who's trying to build something or understand what they can do with their property knows that. It's not necessarily inferring things or trying to print against.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bonner. Anybody have any questions for, I should ask, anybody else here in support of this application? Any questions for Mr. Bonner or for Lee about this ordinance, section 54-506?
Just want to clarify one thing, actually. Without this exception, this item would have come to the board regardless. Essentially, the goal of the exception is to simplify the process. So I guess the question is, if it had not been put in place, we would still be here regardless. Having a discussion about the next item.
Right. Marie, I just sense you're wanting some direction from us, so when this issue comes up again and again, kind of how we feel about this, and not just up to language. Yeah, I guess, I feel pretty comfortable with my interpretation. I've been doing this a long time, so, but, so it's really up to you to decide if you want to go with the interpretation that the applicant is often versus what we've been doing to read it. The wording of this section of the code is not as precise as it should be, but the ordinance itself speaks to the extension of the house. So we viewed that pretty conservatively as the extension, whatever the factor.
And the board has consistently gone with what you're saying interpretation is.
I don't think this section has ever been challenged before. The board disagreed with this once. Penny and I recall matter, and I think it was a case where somebody was proposing to maybe build an addition, a vertical addition to the existing house that didn't meet setback requirements, as well as a rear addition. And we told the board that the only issue before them was the vertical addition. But the rear addition, which was a little bit taller than the rear portion of the house, met this exception and therefore didn't require their approval, and they disagreed with us and said, no, we think that the extension, the rear extension should not be moved forward in the existing rear portion of the house. So from that point forward, we applied that ruling that they made years ago. And it's worked well. I mean, we do get a lot of requests that we can staff approve. If we can't, we just say we've got to go to the board.
So if we uphold your decision, they have to come back with their next application and ask for a special exception, is that right?
That's correct.
And is this subject to the Board of Architectural Review approval as well?
This is not going to require the BZA-Z approval. Because it's outside of their jurisdiction with the type of, no, you say it is? Okay.
Okay, so this will be before the BAR.
Yes.
Does it sound right?
All right, so,
Historical.
so it says is the existing building onto which the addition is attached. Is the second floor attached to the existing building?
Yeah.
Through the first floor? Through the first floor, right?
I'm sorry, what was the
Yeah, I'm looking for language to help salvage the city's interpretation.
There's nothing on
The
that part
existing
about-
building onto which the addition is attached, that means the addition has to be attached to the existing building, right?
Right.
And so if it's one floor to one floor, the entire addition is attached to the existing building. If it's two floors to one floor, then the second floor is attached only through its connection to the first floor, back to the first floor existing, right?
I guess, yeah. Now, so, as a response to that, the addition that requires this exception is only one story. So the part of the area that's in this area that requires this is only one story, and lines up with the existing. Now, there are parts that are over here that are taller, and that do meet all other applicable zoning requirements.
Right, so they meet the height limitation criteria in the ordinance. Correct. Yes.
Chair, there's some, you may have a question for you. Sure. Yeah, I'm Anthony Desu, I'm the owner of the building. I
Yes.
think there's actually something that helps kind of clarify it visually on the
Okay.
page with the red, back to what Chris was saying. You know, the single-story addition, if you kind of go to the elevations, that red line right there, what he's trying to show is that the 3-foot setback, you know, we are in that one-story addition through the back. So what Chris is saying is the actual addition that is against the interpretation of the single story back, that roof line, and we walked it with the neighbor, to, I guess that's the north side along that. There is no, you know, there's an extension of that single family house. I mean, that's there now, but that elevation doesn't change to him that is in the actual 3-foot setback.
The area that requires.
I see what you're saying. You're saying that the area that is built up.
As you look at the
not
roof
in
line
setback
there,
area.
yeah.
I see.
So from where he is, and we do keep that same exception.
I understand. Do we have opposition to B2?
I'm not aware of any opposition that secured some support.
I have a, maybe just a general massing question. At what point does the addition's mass no longer qualify for addition, but as a primary? What constitutes an addition and what constitutes the main portion of the building? And where I'm going with this is the additional square footage appears, at least from maybe from the elevation, not if you read the floor plan, to exceed the original footprint of the structure significantly. We're not talking about
30% increase in usable square footage, but doubling or more, is that my way, or is that?
There's nothing that I know of in the zoning ordinance that would, you know, make
Well,
that distinction.
No, I know, and I guess that's my question is, is it considered an addition, or is it something significantly more than that?
Or zoning, you add on to zoning as an addition, unless there's something specific in the zoning that says otherwise.
Is there a definition for an addition?
No, we have the length issue as exception, but that's not an issue that there's nothing about the size of it.
Mr. Bonner, does it make any difference, practical difference to you, whether the board agrees with your interpretation on B1 and overrules the zoning administrator, or simply grants your application under B2? Does it make any practical difference to the applicant or the owner?
I mean, at this point, since we're here, it does not.
So I think the question to the board is, do we uphold the zoning administrator's review and his interpretation as he's historically interpreted the ordinance, and perhaps discuss how it could be further refined and improved, and then move on to B2, or do we overrule the zoning administrator's decision in agreement with Mr. Bonner's interpretation of the ordinance, and then move on to B2?
I would move to, for discussion at this point, I would move to uphold the administrator's decision and for discussion about potential improvements to the language.
Mr. Bennett moves to approve and uphold the zoning administrator's interpretation, which would be a motion to deny the appeal. So do I have a second? All right. Ms. Grass seconds the motion to uphold the zoning administrator's decision to deny the appeal. Do we have any further discussion?
Add the language out, clarifying.
I don't know that the board can direct the city to go back and try to revise an ordinance, but I think I think the motion on the floor right now is to simply deny the appeal and uphold the zoning administrator's decision. Do we have any further discussion on that motion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The appeal is denied. We will hear from you again shortly. The zoning administrator's decision is upheld. So we're now on to item B2, 610 Rutledge Avenue, North Central, TMS number 460-03-02-053, zone DR1F, request special exception under section 54-110 to allow horizontal expansion, kitchen expansion, family room, bedroom, closet, bathroom, deck, and vertical extension, bedrooms, bathrooms, closets, balcony, that extends a non-conforming 0-foot north side setback, 3 feet are required, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a one-story addition storage bathroom that extends a non-conforming 0.7-foot south side setback to a detached accessory building, 9 feet required. The owner is DFA South LLC. The applicant is Chris Bonner, BZA-Z architecture.
So there's two requests here. The first request is to allow the addition that we just reviewed behind the existing one-story house. The second request is with that small one-story building in the rear addition to that building. Just go through this quickly. So he's explained the special exception. These are the streetscape photos. So here we have the addition to the one-story house, and then here's a one-story addition right here to this existing one-story structure right here, which I think was originally a garage. But more recently, it's been an art gallery, just a small little art gallery. Although it's been vacant, I think, for a few years. So these are the plans. You don't really see the rear addition to the one-story building, small one-story building. And then, of course, you see the addition that they're proposing to the one-story house. And then side elevations, so you can see it's set back a good ways from the street. Is pulled off of that north side property line. So to me, it seems like the impacts to that north side property, the light and air would be minimal. I mean, air impacts potentially, but there is not a yard. There's really the main historic building up at the front of that property to the north, and then there's a two-story building right behind it. So there's really not much yard space back there. They have secured, the applicant has secured letters of support from two property owners, I believe, across the street, so 608 Rutledge and 605, well, that would not be, that would be across the street. 608 would be immediately to the south, so this is the property immediately to the south of 16. And so I recommend approval. I'm not aware of any objections or concerns from any other property owners. Again, I think we could get very situated.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anybody here who wants to speak in opposition to 610 Rutledge Avenue application? B2? Nobody in opposition? City supports? Mr. Bonner, anything further to say on this property?
I'm happy to answer any questions. But generally, for the main home, we're talking about the 3-foot sliver on the property line. The rest of the residential property portion of that doesn't need the zoning code, so it's just that little bit sliver. And for the kind of commercially built garage space, the addition is a bathroom with an ADA bathroom, which requires electric size, and some storage area. As you can tell, the current property has kind of two outbuilding storage buildings that are going to be going away. And so the addition of the storage is essentially kind of fixing that for the inside. ADA bathroom is near impossible to get kind of in the existing structure with the required clearances. That's why it's kind of on the back, so it can be necessarily fenced so it is a functional space.
Thank you, sir. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Bonner or the owner who's here?
I have actually.
All right, nobody has any questions? Do I hear a motion? Motion to approve by Mr. McKay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Goodman, second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. The motion passes. Your special exception number 1, special exception number 2, both granted for 610 Rutledge Avenue. Thank you very much. All right, the next item on the agenda is B3, 240 South Confederate Circle, South Windermere, PMS number 421-13-00-085 and SR-1. Request special exception under section 54-110 to allow one-story addition, workout room bath that extends a non-conforming 8.4 foot west side setback 9 feet of required. Owner applicant Chad and Megan Lee. Mr. Petcho.
So this is a one-story home on this residential property, and you see it's rectangular in shape, and they're proposing a one-story addition would be right back here. So highlighted the addition. It just has a very slight encroachment into the side setback, which is why it's before you tonight. It's so slight, the impact of meeting the required setback versus what they're proposing would be probably. So my recommendation is for approval. They do have support, by the way, from neighboring property owners. both sides of the property, so.
Thank you, Lee. Anybody here in opposition to the application B3 240 South Confederate? All right, nobody's here in opposition. The city supports. Does anybody, well, I guess I ought to ask, but okay. Ms. Lee, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, thank you for your consideration.
Do I have any questions or motions? Okay, move to approve by Ms. Richards. Second by Ms. Grass. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None passes. You are unanimously granted your special exception.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is B4, 86 Murray Boulevard, Charlestown, PMS number 457-11-01-005, zone SR2, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a vertical extension, elevator covered porch to a non-conforming building footprint carport with a 2.5-foot west side setback, 9 feet of required. The owners are Colin Coletti and Claire Schwartz. The applicant is Julia O'Connor, American Vernacular Inc., and Mr. Batchelor.
This is a residential property, and in this case, the addition is more substantial. You can see it located here on Murray Boulevard between Ashley and Rutledge. This is the house in question. So, I'll just skip right to the, so here's the elevation showing the addition. I'll show you the elevation without the addition. So you can see on the top elevation shows that there's a portico share, I guess, and a one-story enclosed space above that for a two-story addition on the side of the house that's currently there. And they're proposing to build a roof and a deck, I guess, over that, existing two-story section. So it'd become 3 stories, and then there's an elevator shaft that kicks up here. So they are extending vertically the non-conforming building footprint of this addition. That's the issue for you tonight. And then the house has a 2.5-foot west side setback, so it's very close to the west side property line. The applicants have secured a text message from the neighbors to the east, or the west rather, indicating that they don't object to this proposal. And so we feel that they meet the special exception requirements of the zoning ordinance and recommend approval of this request.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anybody here to oppose the application at 86 Murray Boulevard? Position, do we have the owners or the applicant?
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to talk to the board
I
about?
can answer any questions that you have.
Anybody have any questions?
Well, this has to go before PRs.
Yes.
Move for approval.
Mr. Fuller moves to approve. Second. Mr. McKay seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The ayes have it. The motion passes. The special exception for 86 Murray Boulevard is granted.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is B5, 213 East Bay Street, French Quarter, TMS number 458-05-03-080, Zone AB, requesting a special exception under section 54-206Y to allow the expansion of a late-night use rooftop terrace for a restaurant bar use that is within 500 feet of a residential zone district. The owner is Yashik Development. The applicant is John C. Sullivan, S. Arch Studio. Mr. Betchel.
213 East Bay Street, commercially zoned property, has a two-story building on it. And that building suffered substantial damage about 10 years ago in a fire. That fire basically left the building unoccupied, what remained of the building unoccupied for a period of time. However, the owner moved forward with plans and secured approvals from the city to reconstruct what had been there, which was 2 floors of interior patron area for bars and that sort of use, with the same operating hours, which extended until 2 a.m. They got those approvals in a timely fashion and then moved forward, but it took a while to get the project built because it was complicated, basically rebuilding the building from inside out. And they're now ready to occupy it, and they've got a tenant lined up. But what happened during the process of reconstructing the building was that plans changed a little bit, and they proposed shifting some of that indoor floor area, patron area, up to the rooftop, a portion of the rooftop. So that's fine. That was allowed, no impact to parking or anything like that. But the hours of operation of the proposed use that will occupy this building are not allowed to operate that late because of their proximity to residentially zoned property, and because it was located outside versus inside. That was a change, and I felt like that couldn't allow that to be grandfathered. So new rules that have restrictions on late night uses within 500 feet of residentially zoned property that apply to that rooftop area. So that's the reason this is before you tonight. You can see here on this zoning map, you've got the residential zoned areas of the French Quarter neighborhood. We're within 500 feet of this property. And so the application has been submitted, and they have spoken with the neighborhood association for the French Quarter and secured approval from them, which is part of this presentation. But I'll just show you briefly the patron area. So there's a lot of back of the house space in this building. You see the patron area on the ground floor, larger patron area on the second floor, and then this rooftop area. So it's towards East Bay Street. The back portion of the building is mechanical base, and it's constructed in a way that with the stair tower and all that, so that there's not a direct line of sight for the noise to travel that way anyway. But what they're proposing is a use that would operate until 2 a.m. on the interior spaces, but the rooftop would close at midnight. And that's what they presented to the neighborhood association, and the neighborhood association said that they're fine with that, provided they close at midnight. So these are all the documents that are required to be submitted with the late night special exception request that is before you tonight. And we think that they prepared an application that warrants approval with the condition that's spelled out here about the operations on the rooftop ceasing no later than midnight. And a second request that I would have is just the not the live music or amplified sound up on the rooftop. I think we discussed that. If the applicants are here, they can let me know if that's not what we discussed. I think we did when we met a while back, but Anyway, that's my recommendations for approval with those two conditions.
All right, thank you, Lee, and just to state those conditions that you would recommend. Number one, no. 2, no live or amplified music on the top. And that's at any time.
Right.
Is there anyone here in opposition to the application for 213 East Bay? Position, so do we have an owner or not?
Comment. I'm John Sullivan, I'm the applicant, SR Studio, 104 Richmond Street. I'll just be very brief. I just want to clarify one thing about the amplified music, because when you consider amplified music, you allow conversational levels.
Right.
And that would be allowed. Right. There's no loud music like that. Otherwise, that I think we're here to answer any questions, but if it's short, please don't there.
All right, the anybody else here to speak in support of the application?
I'm Tom Irvin with Yashik Development. I just want to make sure that you're not saying no live music. You can have an acoustic guitar up there. I think that's what we discussed.
Well, that would have to be reworded then to be no, yes. Well, why don't we just leave it at no sound amplification above normal conversation?
Yeah, that's what we discussed.
They were live music.
So, in other words, whether it's live or not, it won't be at an amplification above the normal.
Right.
And that, forgive me, and that's at any time during the day?
Yes.
So the current statute, right, is no amplified music after 11 p.m., correct? No open doors, no amplified music after 11 p.m. Because we present to the board that you vote without that, I mean, we'll happily keep it. I would like to play music at noon, right? If I have a guitarist at noon, I can't be above voice level.
Well, no amplification.
Is there a way, and forgive me, is there a way we can present to the board where you say, we grant you without this exception, or we grant with the exception? Because ideally, as a restaurant, we'd like to be able to put a live music, a guitarist outside with a small speaker to play, which we would be violating the exception. If it's a make or break, we'll do what we need to do, but I think it certainly conforms to the 11 p.m. ordinance as it stands.
Could you please identify yourself, because I know we've had several people speak, and I think the gentleman behind you identified himself as with the ownership with Yashik. I'm not sure that I heard your name.
Forgive me. Zachary Dennis, 3155 Moonlight Drive. We're the prospective tenants.
Okay. All right, so the board has the ability to approve the application, to approve it with conditions, or to deny the application. And so the city has recommended that the board approve with the conditions. Now, one of the things that I understand about your application is that you have community support for the application, or at least you don't have community opposition. And that's shown, I think, in the record and materials that we've received, and also there's nobody here speaking against you. So my question for you would be this: do they understand, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion in communication, do they understand what the what's been agreed upon with respect to amplified or live music on the rooftop?
Yes, it was communicated with Stephanie Gentile, who's president of the French Quarter, that it would be a solo artist or theme music, amplified music during the daytime, but it would not be loud late night music at all. I'm just scared of the wording of amplification. If we put a speaker there, or even we play, I don't want to run into trouble right? When they say, nope, we're amplifying music, even if it is at a small, reasonable decibel level.
Mr. Dennis, thank you. Lee, could you put back up the letter from, Mr. Batchelder, we've heard Mr. Dennis reference an ordinance about music after 11 p.m. Well, that's the standard rule for the city. My proposed condition applies. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I tend to be conservative on these things because, again, they might do a wonderful job if the approval runs with the property. And I just noticed the tendency over the past 15 years or so that these outside spaces can become noisy and impactful, and in the evenings especially, when the sounds of the city die down a little bit. You're in these residential areas, these noises can be more objections or more impactful. So I tend to be cautious about these things and trying to set what I view to be reasonable standards. And if you wanted to limit that for evening hours or something like that, that would be fine with me. But I would prefer to have it just a straight limitation. And, you know, live music, maybe live music is fine, but it shouldn't be amplified necessarily. But normal conversation is my opinion. Anybody have any questions or discussion?
I agree with Lee. I think it's consistent with what we've considered in previous scenarios. Throughout the day, not just in the evening. From that standpoint, I'm not inclined to limit it to just in the evening hours.
Any other questions for the owner, applicant? Questions for Lee? Discussion? If not, somebody has a motion.
I'll move for approval with the conditions. Condition 1 as it's written, condition 2 modified to strike the live music.
All right, so Mr. Bennett has moved to approve, subject to the conditions. Number 1, rooftop use shall cease no later than midnight. Number 2, there shall be no sound amplification above a normal conversational volume on the roof. That motion, do I hear a second? Ms. Bratz has the second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. The motion passes. The special exception is granted with conditions. Those conditions have been read on the record. They will be attached to your approval. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know in advance, Mr. McKay. I appreciate the service this evening. It's been a long night. All right, item number B6 on our agenda, 207 Ball Street, Charlestown, PMS number 457-07-04-004. Node STR requesting special exception under section 54-110. Allow construction of a detached accessory structure, HVAC platform, that extends a non-conforming 1.5-foot east side setback 6 feet of required. Requesting variance from section 54-301 to allow an HVAC platform having a 61% lot occupancy, 50% limitation, existing lot occupancy 60%. Under Shay Robbins, the applicant is Robbie Marty, Mr. Barrow.
So this property sits on the southeast corner of Broad and Ashley Avenue, across Colonial Lake. And there's very little room on the property to place the HVAC system on a platform. It's in a flood zone, and so they need to elevate that equipment, and we're really left with no choice but to place it against the east side property line at the back of the lot. And the lot occupancy is very minimal. That's a minimal issue. Probably wouldn't staff approve that. There's nothing for the setback issue, the platform. But you can see the property. Let's see. So photographs. House occupies a substantial part of the lot. Then you've got a carport right here. So you're left with this one spot between the back of the house and the carport. And it's shown right here, this view from Ashley Avenue. And the site plan indicates, again, the carport, the driveway right here, the backyard, small backyard, and then this location of the HVAC stand, which has to be elevated quite significantly. So the question was, and I'll just go back to this map here. There's a, you see this lot on Colonial Street, winds back and then touches the subject property right where this stand is proposed. So that's the most affected property, is this Colonial Street property right here. And the house on that lot is all the way up at Colonial Street. You see it in this aerial view right here. But the applicants have secured a letter, or again, a text, I guess, from that neighboring property owner at Colonial Street, indicating that they have no objection to this. So with that, in light of the constraints on the property, we recommend approval.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anyone here in opposition to this request? All right, I see the applicant, and you must be the owner.
Yes.
So anything you'd like to say to the board this evening?
No, we'd be happy to answer any questions if you all have any.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions? Mr. Richards, please to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Goodwin, second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. You have your special exception for 207 Broad. Thank you. That concludes our meeting. The meeting is adjourned.